Imagine a scenario that might hit a little too close to home for a lot of you listening.
Oh, I think we all know where this is going.
Right. So you meticulously budget your income. I mean, you skip the vacations, you say no to the expensive dinners out.
Yeah, you're doing everything right.
Exactly. And you finally, after all that work, build up a $10,000 safety net in your savings account.
Which feels amazing.
It really does. You take a breath, feeling that rare sensation of actual financial security.
But it never lasts, does it?
No. Literally the very next day, your car's transmission completely blows.
It's always the transmission or, the roof.
Right, requiring this massive $8,000 repair. And then a surprise medical bill eats up whatever is left. You are completely back to zero.
It's so frustrating.
It's agonizing. Today on our show, we're looking at a really fascinating set of anonymous notes that argues this is, well, it's not bad luck.
No, not at all.
It's not a coincidence, and it is certainly not some sort of cosmic curse, even though it feels like one.
Yeah, it feels entirely personal when it happens to you.
Exactly. But the material suggests it's actually an invisible, self-sabotaging psychological software running in the background of your mind.
It is a profound shift in perspective, really.
We're exploring the mechanisms behind how our brains actively repel prosperity just to keep us safe.
Right, because when people experience that cycle of, accumulation followed immediately by catastrophe, the default reaction is to look at the math.
Oh, for sure. You open up the spreadsheets.
Exactly. They review their budgets, they try to find the logical flaw in their spending habits, or they blame external economic factors.
Like inflation or, interest rates.
Right. But the material we are analyzing today suggests that what looks like a purely mathematical problem is, in reality, a highly sophisticated psychological defense mechanism.
So you're trying to solve a hardware issue when the problem is entirely in the software.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we are going to understand how this operating system functions, we need to look at the origin of the code.
We have to go back to the beginning.
Yeah. The notes detail this specific case study that illustrates it perfectly. It involves a highly educated professional in their 40s.
Making great money, right?
Right, making an excellent salary, completely capable in their field, yet they were trapped in the exact loop we just described.
Every time they got ahead, something knocked them back.
Every single time they'd get a significant financial cushion, and an emergency would just materialize out of thin air to drain it.
And they couldn't figure out why.
No. But through some really intense analytical work, a very specific, deeply buried memory surfaced from when they were just 5 years old.
Ah, that age is so critical.
Yeah. They witnessed a traumatic family event where their father's entire life savings were lost in a sudden crisis.
And that specific age, 5 or 6 years old, from a developmental psychology standpoint, a child's brain is highly suggestible.
Because they don't have the logic filters yet.
Exactly. They are operating largely in theta brainwave states, essentially acting as little sponges for emotional programming.
Wow, just soaking it all in.
Right. A 5-year-old child does not possess the cognitive architecture to understand the macroeconomic climate, or bad investments, or complex legal disputes.
They just see the fallout.
Yeah, they only understand the world through a binary lens. It's either safety or danger.
So when this child witnessed their father's financial ruin, they didn't process the logistical details of the loss at all.
No, they processed the emotional devastation. They saw their father, their primary source of security, completely broken.
That must have been terrifying.
It was. They felt the sudden, terrifying absence of safety in their own home.
So the child's brain is looking at this terrifying situation and trying to figure out how to prevent it from ever happening again.
It needs a rule to survive.
Right. It needs to understand the cause and effect.
Precisely. The subconscious mind is essentially this giant pattern recognition engine, and its primary directive is always survival.
So what pattern did it see?
In this case, it observed the event and drew a stark, literal conclusion. The logic went like this. Having accumulated savings means that eventually someone or something will take it away.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that loss brings unbearable pain and destroys the safety of the family. Therefore, accumulated money is inherently dangerous.
That is wild. The child's brain encoded a survival rule that equated a savings account with an active threat to their existence.
Exactly. It's like a neurological allergy to wealth.
Consciously, this 40-year-old professional wants the money. I mean, they are working so hard for it.
They want it desperately.
But their subconscious is treating that growing bank balance the same way an immune system treats a virus. it attacks it.
What's fascinating here is the sheer power disparity between the conscious and subconscious mind.
The subconscious always wins, doesn't it?
Every single time. The conscious mind, with all its logic and goals, processes just a tiny fraction of the information that the subconscious does.
So when the conscious desire for wealth conflicts with the subconscious survival mandate,
The survival mandate takes over. As soon as that bank balance hits a certain threshold, the threshold that triggers the 35-year-old memory of impending loss, the amygdala sounds the alarm.
it literally perceives a mortal threat.
It essentially screams, "Danger! We have savings. We are vulnerable to pain. Get rid of the money immediately to restore our safety."
And so it drives the individual to make poor investment choices.
Or it creates psychosomatic stress that leads to distraction and accidents, purely to drain the account and return to the perceived safety of zero.
So the person isn't cursed by the universe at all.
Not even a little bit.
Their brain is just flawlessly executing a 35-year-old safety protocol.
It's doing exactly what it was programmed to do.
But this presents a massive diagnostic challenge for the rest of us listening.
How so?
Well, if our brains are operating on obsolete survival software installed when we were toddlers, how do we even begin to identify which invisible scripts are running?
That is the million-dollar question.
Because we don't consciously remember installing them. The professional in that case study had to do deep analytical work just to find the memory.
It is the ultimate blind spot. You cannot easily read the code from inside the machine.
Right.
However, the material provides a very pragmatic diagnostic tool. You don't necessarily have to go digging for childhood memories right away.
Oh, really? What do you do instead?
Instead, you look at your external reality to reverse engineer the internal software.
Okay, that makes sense.
The principle is that your external life is a perfect, unfiltered printout of your subconscious programming.
So if you want to know what invisible scripts are running,
You simply look at the areas of your life where you are stuck in an unexplainable, repetitive loop. That stubborn stagnation is the physical footprint of the script.
so if you are listening to this, that is the exact thread to pull.
Think about the loops you find yourself in constantly.
Is it financial ceiling you can never seem to break through? Or is it a pattern where every romantic relationship follows the exact same destructive trajectory?
Even when you consciously choose completely different types of partners.
Exactly. Or perhaps every time you get close to a major creative breakthrough, you suddenly lose all motivation, become exhausted, and abandon the project.
That sudden exhaustion is a classic physiological manifestation of a subconscious braking system.
It's literally your body shutting you down.
It is the ego protecting you from the perceived danger of success. And until you bring that mechanism into conscious awareness, it will dictate your behavior.
It dictates your choices and ultimately your entire trajectory.
And the real tragedy is that most people never do this diagnostic work.
No, they just assign the blame to bad luck.
Or an unfair industry, or they just think they have a flawed personality.
Which leads us to a profound reframing within the source material. We typically use the word scarcity to describe a lack of physical resources.
Like an empty bank account or a depleted pantry.
Right, or a failing business. But the text radically expands this definition.
It completely changes how we view the concept.
It argues that scarcity is not merely an economic condition. It is a psychological posture.
Yes, scarcity is operating anywhere in any aspect of your life where you are unable to realize your full potential.
That expansion shifts the entire conversation, doesn't it?
It moves scarcity from an external circumstance to an internal state of restriction.
It really does, because it implies that a billionaire could be living in severe scarcity.
Absolutely.
If someone has massive financial wealth, but is utterly incapable of expressing their true creative abilities because they are paralyzed by the fear of judgment.
Then they are operating in scarcity.
Right. Or if you have a brilliant strategic insight, but you withhold it during a meeting because you are terrified of being wrong.
You are in scarcity. Scarcity is simply the act of withholding your inherent potential from the world.
And that withholding is fundamentally driven by the ego, right?
Or the survival mind, yes. The scarcity mindset is a constant low-grade internal broadcast that insists I am inadequate.
There's not enough to go around.
Exactly. If I step forward and show my true capabilities, I will be exposed, attacked, or diminished.
It is such a defensive, contracted posture against life itself.
It assumes the environment is inherently hostile.
Now, the material contrasts this contracted state directly with a concept it calls existence consciousness.
This is such a beautiful reframe.
It really is. This is the realization that the default underlying operating system of reality is actually abundance.
The realization is simply, I exist, and therefore, by the very virtue of my existence, I have access to absolutely everything I need.
Everything needed to fulfill my specific purpose.
Right. It removes the necessity of fighting for your right to be here.
It must relieve an enormous amount of cognitive and emotional pressure.
Oh, massively. The scarcity model demands that you must constantly fight the universe to extract the resources you need to survive.
It sounds exhausting.
It is.
Mhm.
The existence model suggests that you simply have to align your internal software with the default state of reality.
You do not have to manufacture the resources out of thin air.
No, you just have to remove the subconscious blocks that are actively repelling them.
To make this abstract concept concrete, the text uses a very compelling analogy.
I love this part.
It suggests that when we are born, we do not arrive empty-handed, as the scarcity mindset would have us believe.
We aren't blank slates with nothing to offer.
Exactly. We arrive with a highly customized, profoundly complex toolkit.
And inside this toolkit is absolutely everything.
Every specific latent talent, every ounce of resilience, every cognitive advantage needed to navigate our unique obstacles.
Everything we need to achieve our specific potential is already in there.
But as we grow, the societal conditioning, the unhealed generational anxieties and traumas,
Like the one the 5-year-old experienced.
right, all of that acts like an accumulating fog. It obscures the toolkit entirely,
The ego eventually convinces us that the toolkit does not exist at all.
and that we are walking through a dangerous world entirely unarmed and empty-handed,
And the ego thrives on that illusion of being empty-handed.
because it keeps you reliant on it.
Exactly, because if you believe you lack inherent resources, you become entirely dependent on the ego's primitive defense mechanisms.
Which are hiding, masking, hoarding, and aggression.
You stay small to stay safe. Recognizing and opening that internal toolkit is an act of rebellion against the survival mind.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The source argues unequivocally that the universe has absolutely no grudge against you.
None whatsoever.
If your life looks a certain way, if it is characterized by constant roadblocks, difficult colleagues, or chronic financial stress,
It is not a cosmic punishment.
it is simply a mirror. Your external reality is a direct, unfiltered reflection of your internal belief that your toolkit is empty.
The roadblocks exist because your software is literally expecting roadblocks.
This is the juncture where the material introduces the concept of absolute self-responsibility.
And psychologically speaking, this is incredibly difficult for people to digest.
Oh, it's a very tough pill to swallow.
When you accept that the universe has no grudge against you, and that your external reality is merely a reflection of your internal state.
You strip away every single excuse you have ever relied upon.
Exactly. You lose the justifications for your stagnation. Blaming the macroeconomic climate, blaming an unsupportive partner, blaming systemic industry issues.
All of those externalizations serve as psychological comfort zones.
But they are miserable comfort zones.
People suffer deeply while blaming those external factors.
They do suffer, but there is a twisted secondary gain in being a victim.
What do you mean by secondary gain?
If my lack of progress is the economy's fault or my toxic boss's fault, then I am completely absolved of the terrifying responsibility to change myself.
Ah, I see. It lets you off the hook.
Right. If my stagnation is justified by external forces, I don't have to face the vulnerability of opening my toolkit and risking failure.
Absolute self-responsibility shatters that illusion completely.
It demands that you look at your repetitive loops and say, the external world is just mirroring my internal refusal to step into my potential.
As long as you are pointing your finger outward, you are actively keeping your own toolkit shut tight.
It's entirely on you.
Which naturally leads us to look at the physical behaviors that manifest from this closed toolkit mindset.
Because the mindset always creates physical evidence.
Right. Once we accept that we are responsible for our reality, we have to examine how we are acting within it. And the text identifies a specific behavior as the ultimate undeniable symptom of scarcity.
It is hoarding.
Now, we aren't necessarily talking about the extreme clinical version of hoarding where a house is filled to the ceiling with old newspapers.
No, not that extreme.
The material focuses on hoarding at a much more insidious, normalized level.
It's the hoarding of knowledge, the hoarding of energy, and the hoarding of items for a hypothetical someday.
Hoarding, in this context, is the physical and energetic equivalent of holding your breath indefinitely.
Out of fear that there will be no more oxygen in the room. It is a fundamental disruption of natural flow.
Let's look at the first example the notes provide, which is the hoarding of knowledge.
This one is so common.
They describe an archetype of a person who is essentially addicted to the acquisition of information, but completely terrified of execution.
This is the person who takes course after course.
Right. They accumulate 20 different certifications, they attend every seminar, they read every single book in their field.
Yet they never actually teach.
They never mentor, and they rarely apply the knowledge in a high-stakes, real-world scenario.
Because they constantly tell themselves, I just don't feel ready yet. I need one more certification to be legitimate.
This is a highly prevalent phenomenon, particularly in professional and academic circles.
It is the illusion of productivity masking a profound fear of exposure.
The acquisition of knowledge feels like forward momentum.
But without application, it is merely safe accumulation. What the text brilliantly points out is that unused knowledge eventually becomes a toxic burden.
How does it become toxic?
Well, from a systems perspective, the universe operates on principles of circulation and reciprocity. Inhalation requires an eventual exhalation.
You can't just breathe in forever.
Exactly. To invite new opportunities and genuine abundance into your life, there must be a flow. If you only consume
If you inhale certification after certification,
and you never output that value into the world, you clog your own energetic and cognitive systems. You become a stagnant pond.
wow. Knowledge is meant to function as a currency.
And hoarding it degrades its value while simultaneously eroding your own self-worth.
It's the cognitive equivalent of eating constantly and never expending any physical energy. The system eventually just breaks down under its own weight.
It has to.
And that brings us to another example in the text, one that perfectly illustrates how this mindset manifests in our physical spaces.
Oh, the story about the pajamas.
Yes, the story of the sick day pajamas. This is wild. A mother goes to a department store and buys 2 sets of beautiful, pristine, high-quality pajamas.
But she doesn't allow her children to wear them.
No, she takes them home, folds them meticulously, and locks them away in a high cabinet, explicitly reserving them for when someone ends up in the hospital.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this anecdote is a masterful illustration of how we unknowingly engineer our own suffering.
But from her perspective, she is just being a responsible parent.
She thinks she is demonstrating foresight and care.
Consciously, that is exactly what she believes. She is attempting to exert control over unpredictable future trauma.
But if we analyze this through the lens of behavioral psychology and the concept of the reticular activating system, or RAS,
The implications are entirely different, right?
completely. The RAS is a network of neurons in the brainstem that filters sensory information. It essentially decides what you notice and what you ignore based on what you have deemed important.
So when you prepare for a disaster with that level of specificity and emotional intent,
You are programming your RAS to constantly scan for disaster.
you're priming your brain to look for sickness.
Exactly. But it goes beyond just filtering information. Energetically and psychologically, hoarding items specifically for a catastrophic event acts as a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So when you stockpile money, resources, or specific clothing for a bad day,
You are actively ordering a bad day from reality.
you are creating a physical anchor for illness in your own home.
Every single time that mother opens that cabinet, her subconscious reinforces the expectation of hospitalization.
She is transmitting a clear signal that she expects her family to suffer.
And she has literally built the infrastructure to accommodate it.
You are essentially building a shrine to sickness in your hallway closet.
Yeah.
When you frame it like that, it is genuinely unsettling.
It should be unsettling. It wakes you up to what you're doing.
So if we recognize this tendency in ourselves, whether we are hoarding certifications, emergency funds driven by panic, or literal items for a catastrophe.
We reverse the momentum.
Right. The material provides very specific physical directives to break this psychological stagnation.
The physical actions are paramount here.
You can't just meditate on it.
No, you cannot simply think your way out of a deeply ingrained scarcity mindset. You have to engage the physical body to create a psychological shift. Action precedes belief, right?
In many neuroplasticity models, yes. By moving physical objects, You are disrupting the established neural pathways associated with hoarding and retention.
The first directive is ruthless decluttering. The text advises looking at your physical environment, starting with your closet.
The closet is always the best place to start.
If you possess clothing that you have not worn in 2 years, you must remove it.
It does not matter what the initial financial investment was.
And it does not matter if you are holding on to it, hoping you might lose 10 pounds and fit into it again.
Retaining those items is a manifestation of scarcity. It is a fundamental lack of trust in your future ability to acquire what you need.
So get them out. Then the instructions move to the kitchen.
Oh, this one is powerful.
You are to empty and thoroughly clean your dry goods pantry. The rice, the pasta, the canned goods.
Take every single item out.
Wipe down the shelves and perform this ritual twice a year. If you have 10 boxes of pasta sitting in the back of the pantry from 3 years ago, donate them. The pantry is incredibly symbolic in human psychology. It represents our most primal survival instinct, which is the fear of starvation.
It is the modern equivalent of the winter food cache.
Exactly. By intentionally clearing it out and releasing excess, you are sending a powerful signal to your limbic system.
You are physically demonstrating the belief, I trust my capability.
I trust that there will always be enough resources available when I need them. I do not need to operate from a posture of panic.
You are lowering your baseline cognitive load by reducing the visual reminders of your own survival anxiety.
You stop seeing the panic every time you open the door.
There is an additional layer to this process that I found really profound.
The washing of the clothes.
Yes. The text notes that when you gather the clothes you are going to donate, you shouldn't just shove them into a trash bag and drop them at a donation bin.
No, it explicitly instructs you to wash the clothes first.
You wash them to deliberately cleanse them of your old energetic residue.
Your anxieties and the scarcity mindset that kept them locked in your closet.
You want to ensure that when you pass these items on, you are transmitting only positive intentions, not your leftover panic.
From a behavioral standpoint, that extra step of washing the clothes acts as an intentional closing ritual.
It transforms the mindless act of discarding into a conscious act of processing and releasing.
It forces you to slow down and acknowledge what you are actually letting go of.
And by releasing these items with intention and care, you create a vacuum in your physical and psychological space.
And a fundamental law of systems is that nature abhors a vacuum.
When you clear space from a state of trust rather than a state of loss, you create the capacity for new opportunities to enter.
New relationships, new ideas, you are reestablishing the flow.
But managing our physical space and our own immediate habits is only one piece of the puzzle. The material then pivots to address the environmental and historical baggage we carry.
This is where it gets into the deep developmental stuff.
Yeah. This brings us to a major section of the analysis, our parental blueprints and the energetic environments we absorbed during our formative years.
The text introduces a fascinating framework regarding how we relate to the archetypal concepts of father and mother energy.
And how our relationship with these archetypes directly governs our financial reality today.
It suggests that the father energy is fundamentally associated with the intake of abundance.
The outward motion of hunting, gathering, and bringing resources into the sphere.
Conversely, the mother energy is associated with the retention, the nurturing, and the fertilization of that abundance once it has been acquired.
It is crucial to understand that this is a psychological framework, not a rigid commentary on literal gender roles, right?
Absolutely. We are talking about the archetypal energies that were modeled by your primary caregivers during your early development.
The child's brain is constantly seeking to understand how the world operates.
So it observes the dynamic between the provider of resources and the manager of the household. How did the individual who brought the money in behave?
What was their emotional state? How did the individual who managed the resources react to them?
Right. If the primary earner in your household was constantly stressed, angry, and complained bitterly about their job every night at the dinner table.
Your absorbent childhood brain encodes the belief that the intake of resources is inherently tied to suffering and anger.
Exactly. You learn very quickly that making money hurts.
And if the caregiver responsible for managing the household was constantly terrified of running out, hiding money, or fighting over bills,
you encode the belief that retaining resources is a state of perpetual anxiety.
the text emphasizes that if you want to unlock your own capacity for prosperity, identifying and resolving any hidden resentments toward your parents' modeling is an absolute prerequisite.
Now, we must acknowledge that this is incredibly demanding psychological work.
Because many people are dealing with legacies of deeply flawed, neglectful, or even abusive parenting.
The conscious mind understandably argues, I have every right to be angry, my parents failed me, they modeled terrible financial and emotional behaviors.
And from a strictly historical perspective, that assessment might be entirely accurate.
But from an operational standpoint, holding on to that resentment is akin to drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Because harboring that resentment actively blocks the exact internal pathways you need to succeed.
You are fighting the blueprint rather than rewriting it.
Yes. When you maintain a state of blame toward your caregivers, you are keeping your nervous system locked in the past.
You are literally restricting your own access to the internal intake and retention circuits of your toolkit.
The material insists that you must find a way to recontextualize your parents,
You have to view them not as these omnipotent figures who maliciously failed you.
but within the context of their own deeply flawed, traumatized human experience.
You have to conceptually see the scared, unhealed child operating inside your parent,
When you can examine their failures through a lens of objective understanding,
recognizing that they were almost certainly running on broken, scarcity-driven scripts inherited from their parents.
then the emotional charge of the resentment begins to dissipate.
And as that resentment dissolves, the cognitive and emotional bandwidth that was previously consumed by anger becomes available for your own growth.
The circuits finally unblock.
It is an act of tactical self-liberation. It is not an endorsement of their mistakes.
But we aren't just programmed by the past, are we? We are continuously programmed by our present environment.
Oh, heavily. The notes strongly emphasize the law of proximity, commonly known as the five-person rule.
This is the sociological principle that we inevitably become the aggregate average of the 5 people we spend the majority of our time with.
If your immediate social circle is constantly logged in a state of complaint,
If every social gathering inevitably devolves into a grievance session about the terrible economy,
how the industry is unfair, and how life is inherently stacked against you.
your brain adapts to that environment. It literally copies those neural pathways to ensure you remain part of the tribe.
The mechanism behind this is deeply rooted in evolutionary biology.
Specifically, the function of mirror neurons, right?
Yes, we are biologically wired for mimicry. Mirror neurons fire both when we act and when we observe the same action performed by another.
They are the reason yawning is contagious.
And they are the neurological basis for empathy and social cohesion. For our ancestors, synchronizing with the emotional state and behavior of the tribe was a matter of life and death.
If the tribe was vigilant and fearful, you needed to be vigilant and fearful to survive the impending threat.
Today, that exact same biological mechanism ensures that if your modern tribe's baseline is constant complaint and perceived victimhood,
Your brain will adopt that specific frequency as the objective baseline for reality,
you will literally lose the cognitive ability to perceive opportunities.
because your reticular activating system will be exclusively calibrated to scan for threats, injustices, and reasons to complain at the next dinner party.
You become blind to abundance simply because your social environment does not value it.
To counter this biological drift, the material offers some highly unconventional, almost aggressive advice on how to intentionally upgrade your environmental inputs.
It advises you to deliberately place yourself in environments where abundance is the absolute, unquestioned norm.
The instructions are so specific. Go walk through high-end luxury shopping districts.
You don't need to purchase anything.
No, simply walk through the space. Stroll through the wealthiest, most exclusive neighborhoods in your city.
Sit in the lobby of a five-star hotel.
And while you are there, simply observe. Watch how highly successful, comfortable people occupy space.
Observe how they sit, how they carry their posture.
And crucially, how they communicate boundaries with service staff or colleagues.
And this exercise is exactly where the ego will mount its most aggressive defense.
Oh, the resistance is huge.
When you intentionally place yourself in an environment of extreme wealth, and you are currently operating from a place of financial or emotional scarcity,
The cognitive dissonance is massive. You will likely feel a profound sense of not belonging.
to protect you from that uncomfortable feeling of inferiority, the ego's immediate defense mechanism is harsh judgment.
The internal monologue will immediately start generating critiques. Look at these superficial people. Look at how wasteful this is.
I am morally superior to them because I am struggling and authentic while they're just out of touch.
That defensive judgment is incredibly loud. It is so much easier to criticize the environment than to admit you feel intimidated by it.
Exactly. But the text is very clear on this point. The objective of this exercise is absolutely not to induce jealousy.
Nor is it to foster feelings of inferiority or moral superiority.
The objective is to consciously download a different neurological frequency.
You are deliberately exposing your mirror neurons to a completely new baseline of reality.
It is a form of self-directed exposure therapy.
When you observe massive abundance and intentionally suppress the urge to resent it.
When you can look at a beautiful, sprawling estate and simply think, what an incredible manifestation of human potential.
Without making it mean something negative about your own life.
You are actively rewiring your brain. You are training your subconscious to perceive wealth, ease, and expansive boundaries not as alien, hostile concepts.
But as normal, highly attainable human experiences, you are desensitizing your nervous system to the shock of abundance.
You are essentially trying to acclimate your system to a new altitude.
But actually putting yourself in those environments and actively attempting to change your baseline requires an emotional state that terrifies most people.
It requires genuine vulnerability.
And this brings us to a substantial section of the analysis, the deconstruction of the comfort zone.
Now, conventionally, we hear comfort zone and we envision a cozy, safe, protective space.
Right, like a warm blanket. But the text rebrands this concept entirely. It defines the comfort zone as a zone of decay.
It is a space that does not protect us, but actively drains our life force energy through the maintenance of illusion.
Rebranding it as a zone of decay is a vital linguistic shift because it completely shatters the illusion of safety.
In the natural world, biological stagnation is synonymous with death. If a body of water ceases to flow, it becomes a breeding ground for bacteria and disease.
The psychological comfort zone operates on the exact same principle. It is not safety.
It is merely familiar, predictable stagnation. It is the slow atrophy of potential.
And what keeps us paralyzed within this zone of decay, the material points to the mask of perfection.
We expend an exorbitant, exhausting amount of our daily cognitive energy hiding our perceived flaws and weaknesses.
We are absolutely terrified of being found out.
The notes provide sharp examples of this masking. They describe an individual who carries deep shame about growing up in poverty.
So they will spend their absolute last $10 on a flashy, expensive dinner or a designer accessory merely to maintain the outward illusion of wealth to their peers.
Or, in a professional setting, an individual who will pretend to completely understand a complex concept in a meeting.
Because they're terrified that asking a clarifying question will expose them as incompetent.
The physiological and psychological toll of wearing that mask continuously is staggering.
It has to be exhausting.
In psychology, we refer to this as allostatic load. It's the wear and tear on the body and brain resulting from chronic stress.
When you are constantly guarding your insecurities, when your primary objective in every interaction is to ensure you are not seen as less than perfect.
You are operating in a state of hypervigilance. This leaves virtually no energy available for creativity, risk-taking, or genuine connection.
By hiding your perceived wounds, you are firmly locking the door to your true potential.
Because true potential requires expansion, and expansion inevitably requires visibility.
The material insists that to break out of the zone of decay, you must cultivate the courage to be brutally vulnerable. You have to drop the mask.
Dropping the mask often requires drawing very difficult lines in the sand. It means advocating for yourself when it is deeply uncomfortable.
Absolutely. The text uses a common workplace dynamic to illustrate this.
Imagine you have a superior who is subtly bullying you.
Consistently undermining your contributions or disrespecting your time.
The safe response, the response dictated by the comfort zone, is to keep your head down.
Swallow your pride and maintain the illusion of compliance just to ensure you keep your paycheck.
But the material demands that you find the courage to draw a boundary. It asks you to stand up and state clearly, this behavior is unacceptable.
Even if your voice is shaking and even if it feels completely terrifying.
Because every single time you swallow that disrespect to maintain the peace, you are reinforcing the subconscious scarcity script that insists you are powerless and dependent.
If we look at the reality of that situation, we have to acknowledge the immediate pushback most people will feel.
Let's really examine the worst-case scenario.
Right. What if you take the advice? You step out of the zone of decay, you drop the mask, you stand up to that toxic boss.
And it goes horribly wrong.
They do not respect your boundary. They become enraged and fire you on the spot.
You were vulnerable, you took the risk, and the immediate result was catastrophic failure. You lost your primary source of income.
That specific, terrifying scenario is the exact fear that keeps the entire architecture of the scarcity mindset locked in place.
But this is precisely where we must examine how the text redefines the concept of failure.
A scarcity mindset analyzes that scenario, getting fired for setting a boundary, and the ego interprets it as a fatal blow.
The internal narrative screams, I am humiliated, I was wrong to speak up, I have lost my security.
I will never, ever risk asserting myself again. I will hide forever.
The scarcity mindset views failure as a permanent tattoo of worthlessness.
It takes the external event and makes it an indictment of their core identity.
Exactly. It conflates an action with identity. But an abundance mindset, operating from existence consciousness, processes the exact same failure entirely differently.
It views failure purely as data acquisition. It actively strips the emotional humiliation out of the event.
If you are fired for setting a necessary boundary, the abundance mindset asks analytical questions.
Okay, what data did I just gather from this experiment?
I learned that this specific corporate environment was fundamentally toxic and incompatible with my long-term growth.
I learned that my method of delivering the boundary perhaps needs tactical refinement.
What specific variable did I miscalculate? And how do I drastically adjust my strategy for the next attempt?
It is the scientific method applied to personal development. A scientist looking at a failed laboratory experiment doesn't collapse on the floor and declare they are a worthless human being.
They simply record the result, adjust the variables, and run the test again. The failure isn't personal.
It's just feedback.
Yes. And success heavily favors the brave, precisely because the brave are willing to run the experiment significantly more times than the fearful.
You must risk the intense, visceral discomfort of visibility.
You have to be willing to be seen trying, and you have to be willing to be seen failing.
Because the alternative, rotting quietly and safely in the zone of decay, is an infinitely worse fate.
That reframing of failure is incredibly liberating.
Because it implies that the sting of getting it wrong isn't lethal. It is just necessary information for the next iteration.
But as we transition toward the final principles in these notes, the material takes a very holistic, integrated turn.
It makes it crystal clear that abundance is not a compartmentalized phenomenon. You cannot silo your life.
You cannot be ruthlessly greedy, manipulative, or cruel in your business practices, and then sit on a meditation cushion expecting financial abundance or inner peace to shower down upon you.
The system does not function that way.
The universe operates as a singular, interconnected fabric. A tug on one thread inevitably affects the tension of the whole garment.
You cannot isolate your behaviors.
The text provides such profound, everyday examples of this interconnectedness.
It posits that your overall capacity for abundance is directly tied to micro-behaviors. It is tied to how you treat a stray animal you encounter on the street.
It is tied to whether you possess the awareness to notice and water a dying houseplant in your office lobby.
It is intimately connected to your patience and tone of voice when speaking to a stressed-out cashier at the end of a long day.
If you are stingy with your baseline kindness, if you actively withhold your compassion from the environment around you, you are operating from a core state of scarcity.
You are signaling that you believe there is not enough goodwill to go around.
This raises an important question, though, regarding the direction of that compassion.
How so?
If we are evaluating our alignment with abundance by how we treat the cashier, the stray animal, and the houseplant,
We must also examine how we are treating the most vulnerable and ever-present entity in our sphere of influence.
which is, of course, ourselves.
The text introduces the concept of self-violence, and it is a completely different way to look at how we treat ourselves.
It is perhaps the most pervasive and destructive form of scarcity.
The source specifically identifies self-violence as a massive, often invisible block to realizing potential.
And it expands the definition far beyond physical harm. The text revisits the concept of hoarding to illustrate this.
Having 120 shirts tightly packed into a closet when you realistically only require 20.
The text classifies that as a form of greedy self-violence.
It is the ego suffocating the physical and cognitive space of the self under the sheer weight of material panic.
It creates a hostile living environment.
It is a lack of respect for your own physical space. And the internal monologue we tolerate is an even more aggressive form of this violence.
Absolutely. The internal dialogue is where the violence is most acute.
Beating yourself up incessantly over every minor infraction.
Reflexively calling yourself stupid when you drop a glass or misplace your keys.
Holding yourself to completely impossible, punishing standards of perfection.
That is severe emotional self-violence. From a physiological standpoint, Chronic negative self-talk triggers the same stress responses as external physical threats.
You are constantly flooding your own system with cortisol.
It is essentially an autoimmune response of the mind, where your consciousness is actively attacking your own self-worth.
How can an operating system designed for abundance function when the hardware is under constant, relentless attack from within?
It simply can't. You are generating a hostile, toxic environment inside your own body and expecting it to produce prosperity?
So we have synthesized this incredible wealth of information today.
We really have covered a lot of ground.
We have examined the childhood survival scripts, the forgotten toolkit, the dangers of hoarding knowledge, the mechanics of boundary setting, the reframing of failure as data, and the reality of self-violence.
But the text concludes with a massive, uncompromising warning label.
It explicitly states that simply listening to this analysis, simply nodding along to these psychological concepts and finding them interesting,
Does absolutely nothing to change your reality.
information without aggressive application is completely useless.
In fact, it's just another form of hoarding.
If you listen to this, think, wow, what a great psychological insight, and then tomorrow you go right back to complaining about the economy with your coworkers.
And letting your boss disrespect your boundaries.
You have entirely wasted your time.
Insight without corresponding action is the ultimate, most deceptive comfort zone.
Because it provides a dopamine hit.
You feel a false sense of accomplishment because you now intellectually understand the mechanism of your problem.
But because you take no physical action, the actual reality of your life remains completely untouched.
You become an educated prisoner.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening?
It means you have to embody the change.
You must let go of the warm, comforting blanket of the victim mindset. You have to stop externalizing your locus of control.
Stop complaining about the variables outside your influence.
And start making the terrifying, vulnerable, active choices that actually align with the life you claim you want to build.
You have to physically bag up the clothes, wash them, and give them away.
You have to force yourself to walk through the wealthy neighborhood and observe your own defensive judgments.
You have to draw the line in the sand at work.
You have to physically move the energy. You must alter the variables in the experiment.
You really have to alter the variables.
Let's synthesize the entire journey we've taken today. We began this analysis by looking at a highly relatable, deeply frustrating scenario.
The leaky bank account, the broken transmission.
The wiped out savings that felt like a curse. And what we've uncovered through this material is that the barrier was never the mathematics of the spreadsheet.
It is about a human being's profound, almost magical ability to reprogram the fundamental code of their own existence.
We are not permanently bound by the terror of a 5-year-old child trying to make sense of a parent's ruin.
We are not bound by the unhealed, inherited anxieties of our caregivers.
And we certainly are not bound by the complaints and limitations of our current social circles.
We all arrived here with a fully stocked toolkit.
And it is just sitting there, waiting for us to stop blaming the world and open it.
And opening that toolkit requires a willingness to step out of the zone of decay and into the unknown.
We spend an enormous percentage of our lives carefully mapping out the invisible walls holding us back.
We explain our limitations to our friends. We build solid, logical justifications for our stagnation.
But I want to leave the listener with a final thought that extends beyond our personal lives. We have spent this entire time discussing individual scarcity.
But consider this principle scaled up.
If individual human beings are running on unhealed, 5-year-old trauma software,
What happens when those individuals form companies, draft legislation, or run economies?
our global economic systems, our corporate cultures of endless accumulation, just a macro reflection of this exact same unhealed hoarding?
Our entire society is operating out of a sick day pajama mentality, expecting catastrophe and therefore manifesting it on a global scale.
We spend so much time complaining about the invisible walls holding us back.
But consider this. If you were to completely drop your scarcity mindset tonight, let go of your comforting excuses, and finally access your full potential.
Who would you be forced to become tomorrow?
And is it possible that your real fear isn't failure, but the immense, unstoppable power of your own success?
That is a staggering perspective to consider. Are we living in a world built by 5-year-olds protecting their savings? That is the question to sleep on tonight. Thank you so much for joining us on this immersive exploration of the material. As always, take these concepts, challenge them, test them relentlessly in your own life, stay curious, and keep questioning your default settings. We'll catch you next time.